Welcome, everyone. It's a Wrap with Rap. I am your host, Ron Rappaport. This podcast features people who have overcome life's challenges and adversities, people who can inspire and motivate, and people who can educate us on an assortment of topics. My guest today is Jenny Dalton, author of Butterflies and Bullies, as well as a speaker, a coach, a facilitator, a leader, and a healer. She earned a BA in English Literature and History from Indiana University, and since graduation, she has earned postgraduate certificates in several fields of interest. She is curious and often transforms her life in various ways. Jenny has always loved writing and has published articles and poetry in numerous venues. Today, she is an entrepreneur, facilitates groups and coaches individuals toward powerful change. She teaches and practices yoga. She mentors young women and helps support the education of girls in Haiti, and she travels the world. It took her 10 years to write the creative nonfiction book about her experience being bullied in the 5th grade. She has written the book for all the girls and women who were bullied and are being bullied as we speak. The book was written to ignite conversation. Jenny is a supporter of the podcast, and her book is featured on the podcast Facebook page. Welcome, Jenny, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here because you have some of the, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want you to know, I feel like you help people share the best kinds of stories.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. It's so great to have you on. You offer all of us the perspective of knowing your feelings going through the bullying experience in school and the ability to understand what it's like for girls going through this. So I want to start out, what prompted you to write the book, and what was the 10-year journey doing it like?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So the prompt was that I was in my 20s and I had been a bullied girl, and it was really starting to weigh on me in such a way that I was journaling about it a lot. I had a lot of anger that I was journaling about too. I kept having repeat relationships, whether with other, girlfriends or with men that I attracted in my life that weren't exactly healthy for me. I could feel that they weren't healthy. So I just started to dive into writing, letters to my younger self, doing a lot of healing of my inner child. And it really just started to emerge that this experience that I'd had being bullied in 5th grade was really impacting a lot of what I knew about myself. And anyway, just lots of journaling, lots of things. And as anyone who's out there who's a writer knows, the more you write, the more the work that you're working on begins to surprise you and take its own form. And I realized over time that I was writing a book, and that it wasn't really a fiction book, and it wasn't really nonfiction, but it was something inspired by the Judy Blume books that I read when I was young, because I felt like at the time, when I was being bullied, there weren't any like Judy Blume books about this experience that could give me some sort of guidance around how do I deal with this? How am I feeling the right thing? Is this only happening to me?
Right. It just wasn't talked about at that time.
No. And so I felt like I wanted to write that book that expressed those true feelings about just how deeply hurtful it is and how it makes you question who you are. And write a story about a girl who learns to find some resilience in the process. And so, like I said, it took me 10 years to write it, but I think that was a lot of 10 years of like self-therapy and learning to understand what parts of me were a bullied girl reacting to things in my life from a bullied girl perspective. And how do I overcome that? What's on the other side of that? How do I make my way in the world, not as this victim, but as someone who has healed from that experience. Of course, it's, the onion layers keep getting pulled back, and it's been, decades since that time, but I'm, still unraveling.
Yeah. It something like that happens to you. It goes all the way into your mature years. Yeah. It just doesn't stop. Why do you think you were targeted to be bullied in the 5th grade?
Well, I try to explore this in my book. of Butterflies and Bullies. Part of it, I think, was triggered by moving from one public school to another one. I was brought to a new neighborhood, like kind of across the other side of the tracks. I was the girl who grew up on maybe the lower income, middle income side of the tracks. And my new school, which is where the gifted program was in, like the richer neighborhood. And a couple of girls came with me from the other side of the tracks over to this new school. And I think that amongst us, there was a bit of some competition for, who would be friends with the friend group that had already been established at that school. Right. There's always like the cool girls, and we were like the new girls. And, we had our thing that we'd had since, kindergarten through third grade, fourth grade.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we're in this new environment and we have to kind of jockey for attention. And I am very much a little bit, how would I describe myself? I guess I'm outgoing, but I'm also shy. So I'll often put myself in that shy place to start. And so I was probably targeted for being a little bit on the weaker side of the spectrum.
So the book is set in the 1980s. Would middle graders and adults relate to it today? And who is the main audience for your book?
This is such a great question. I thought all along that I was writing a young adult book. Again, I really tried to model the story and the way that it's told on Judy Blume stories, which, are really kind of for that middle grade audience. But it turns out, and this book, has been essentially like certified by librarian friends that I have, to be appropriate for junior high students for sure. Yeah. However, what I'm finding as the book is gaining traction and folks are giving me their feedback is that the main audience really is women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, women my age who at the time of their formative experience didn't have the resources that girls have today. I mean, obviously, with cyberbullying and, it's a whole different landscape, but I think that's what's appealing about it being set in the 80s. It's really nostalgic for women who may have grown up at some point during the 70s and 80s. And, they're reminded of a lot of the attitudes that were more present back then, like, oh, you'll get over it, or like, there's nothing wrong here, don't worry about it. You guys, you'll suck it up, you'll survive, that kind of attitude that girls today aren't necessarily on the whole growing up with as much as we did. So, like I said, I think that the audience has shifted from what my original intention was. And now I'm really putting it out there that, women who are feeling like they need to peel back some of their own layers of the onion of pain and childhood trauma and what have you with friendships, if you want to dive into it, this book is that catalyst for this conversation within yourself and with your friends. And it's, it's definitely brought up a lot of conversations with women my age who are like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that. Like, I feel, I'm bringing up all this shame and guilt and all these feelings that I think collectively as women of our generation, we're really poised to work through those things right now as a collective. Well,
I have to say, just being a man, I read the book and I really could get your feelings come through. I could feel what you were feeling.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's why I think that it is relatable to young girls, especially, and young men, I guess, too. I mean, it's the feeling part of it is what I really wanted to get across. And I think that that's what's the most relatable. And
you got it across very well. Have things changed socially for middle schoolers, teens, young women since the 1980s? Is bullying of girls more of an issue now, or was it always an issue?
Well, unfortunately, I think that it's a part of our human makeup right now. It's kind of in our DNA right now. And I would really love for it to evolve out of our DNA.
Yeah, right.
But, the pressures I think are still there. I know that young women in my life have been bullied. They've had those experiences. cyberbullying, while I don't personally have any direct experience with it, and nor do I have any young people close in my life who've experienced it, I know anecdotally that it's just this whole complicated web of hurt and pain that a lot of young people just don't really quite know how to extricate themselves from and really become challenged by. And I don't, like I said, I don't have that personal experience, but I think it's still there to the extent whether it's more or less, I don't really know. But I do also know that, folks have been starting to do some studies of, older adults who'd had experiences being bullied in their past, and how is that beginning to impact them as adults. And I think that there's just a generation that has a greater understanding of its hurtful impacts and wanting to stop it sooner. And so there are so many more programs out there, like school assemblies and other kind of curriculum and things like that exist now as resources for students that weren't there when I was growing up.
So you're involved with an organization called the Kind Campaign. What activities does the Kind Campaign do to address the bullying issue?
Well, the Kind Campaign is pretty extraordinary, and I urge everyone to...
I would like to take a moment out of the podcast to tell you about an exceptional young lady doing amazing things. Jasmine Tillman, also known as J.R. Tillman. Born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, this 23-year-old is a life purpose coach, transformational speaker, and self-published author. She has always wanted to help others as long as she could remember. She just didn't know how. She has worked many jobs coming up and ended up growing up pretty fast. Even though she had a swift childhood, she spent plenty of time learning great lessons that had a ton of weight on her decision making. Her dad spent most of his time on vacation, aka the jailhouse, and mom worked hard to support her and her siblings. Many only know and experience the broken homes and family bonds these days, especially children of color. That is the number one reason JR has chosen to be an author, life purpose coach, and transformational speaker to lend a hand in the black hole of society, where fathers fend for their neighborhoods better than their homes, and mothers club harder and spend more time chasing men than raising what should be their main priority, their children. Sadly, JR fell victim to this pattern caused by the influence of society once upon a time. JR has written and just had released her self-help woman empowerment journal titled Get a Grip Will Ya, You Matter, to fuse passion and purpose to guide women and teens in a path of empowerment and self-discovery. In 2022, it is a challenging time to be a teenager. From social media, influencer culture, a global pandemic, and everything in between, struggling with a sense of self and peer pressure is at an all-time high amongst American teens. JR seeks to act as a big sister to help guide and support teens as opposed to parental authority. JR understands the struggles at hand, school troubles, dead-end jobs, family issues, and a sense of being lost. And she has learned how the mind holds the secret to curating success and true happiness. Get a Grip Will Ya, You Matter is an awesome read for teens, parents, anyone seeking self-discovery, and would make an excellent gift. The book may be ordered through Amazon, and the book information will be listed in the podcast notes, podcast website under the sponsor tab, and the podcast Facebook page.
Look it up, especially if you have young people. So they go to schools, and they've been doing it remotely during the pandemic. And they have assemblies with just girls, and it can be like, just the junior high girls or all the girls of the school,
Yeah.
And their main program is really, having girls understand that, there are, there's real people, I guess, at the end of each end of the story. And that the main thing that can heal this is, a sincere, real apology that comes from, especially the bullied girl or the bullier, having some understanding of what it feels like to be the bullied girl.
Right.
And then from real empathy and real compassion and real understanding, an apology arises that feels really authentic, that the that both girls can like accept and move on from there. And so it's really powerful stuff. And
it sounds great. That sounds really tremendous. Do most daughters tell their parents what's going on, in your opinion?
I mean, I think it depends. I think it depends on what kind of, human girl you are and what kind of relationship you have with your parents. I mean, I can tell you right now, I didn't tell my parents anything. And I felt very alone. I felt very unseen, I think. And I think I purposefully tried to hide, especially just those most vulnerable parts of myself. Whereas I was also the oldest of four. Yeah. And so I think that there was a part of me that always tried to caretake for everyone else instead of caretaking for myself and understanding what that might look like in my parent relationship. So I don't know. I mean, I have friends that have, girls that do share a lot with them. And I think that as, I'm just like a step parent. I'm not a real mom, I guess, so to speak, but I have a lot of young women in my life. But my friends who are parents, I don't know, I think they're really healthy parents. And of course, there's loads of them out there that aren't, but they're the kind of parents who are cultivating honest relationships with their kids. And it's really inspiring to see. But they had to learn that for themselves because their parents were not, on the whole, the kind of parents that they told things to either. So I don't know. I think there's a shift going on.
Well, do you think
that's anecdotal?
Do you think any of the girls, do you think shame enters into it? Like they're ashamed that they're being bullied, so they don't want to talk about it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know that for me personally, shame was a huge factor in why I didn't say things. Yeah. I think that for friends of mine that I have who've told me their stories of either being the bullier or the bullied, that shame is actually, is absolutely like the number one thing that, had them stay small or had them not share what was happening with a teacher or their parents or not stand up for themselves, and then that as the bully too, I have had friends and readers who confided in me that they were the bully. I mean, they still feel shame. They feel like, should I reach out to this person? It's been 15, 25 years. Should I say something? I'm like, what's in your heart? Do you feel like you need to? Like,
it's powerful stuff. I mean, we're going back to childhood, and 25 years later, they're still thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just coaching a woman yesterday, I think it was, who's in her 60s, who said to me that, she's still angry at this girl who bullied her when she was 14. And she's like, and we're still friends. I talk to her like once a month. I'm like, well, maybe you should say something like, I know this might be uncomfortable and weird, but I'm still feeling these feelings. Do you want to talk about it? And see what she says? Because we don't know. I mean, I think that's the biggest lesson that I had was the girl who bullied me. I confronted her when I was in college, and she was like, what are you talking about? She didn't even remember.
She forgot about it.
Yeah. And so, maybe she didn't, but that was the answer she gave me. But what I learned was, I was like, well, she had a lot going on in her house too.
Yeah. What would you tell a young girl who is being bullied at school or afraid she is going to be bullied or ignored or left out? What would you tell that young girl? The people out there listening, the parents listening right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing, which is not necessarily advice, but it's more just like, I see you, you're seen and you are heard, and we are willing to see you and to hear you. And, go find someone that you trust and someone that you feel, has your back, whether or not you feel loved by them or not, but do you feel like they have your back and you can trust them and tell them what's going on for you and, from your heart. And, don't keep it inside, or write about it. I think that was, journaling saved my life.
Yeah.
And I think that, writing in a journal and really starting to understand your own true voice of yourself, you can get some of the best advice from yourself, when you're willing to listen.
What would you tell a girl who is bullying others?
Stop it. I think that this is something that some of my peers who talk about the bullying space will agree that it's just time to end this. But there is a reason why, the bullier is being the bullier. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's making you feel pain or what's making you feel disempowered, or it's making you feel like you want to lash out. Like, let's talk about it. Let's get to the root cause and see if we can help you in some way, whether it's stuff that's going on at home that makes you feel uncomfortable, let's find a way to help you get the support you need to handle that. But lashing out at other girls or other boys or, whomever is just, that's not the answer. So let's help you get to the healing.
Right. What is the difference between bullying and having leadership ability? In other words, being an empowered woman, for example?
Such a great question. I actually get asked this a lot. I think that, kindness and respect are a big part of it. I think that as women, we are often, called, bullies or worse words, right? When we're exerting ourselves as leaders, and can get a lot of bullied back, for being our assertive selves and even for like being our goofy selves, right? Which I think are also powerful parts of who we are. And it's, I come from a humanist perspective. It's like, it's not about feminism or the patriarchy necessarily, though we have been taught that, maybe it's better to call someone a bully than to let them be empowered in their leadership or to call them a feminist and ignore them or whatever those things are. But when you're being kind and respectful of other people and their abilities, I think that you can be firm in how you're speaking about like direction or feedback or anything. I mean, I've been a manager, and especially a manager of other women in numerous jobs. And what I find is it's like, as long as, I feel like I like to give people space to make mistakes and to succeed. And then we try to have conversation about it and be really honest and intentional with communication as opposed to, being confrontational.
What do you think? Some of these girls or women are bullies without even realizing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that in some of the behavior is unconscious. But I think that there are intentional bullies out there for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, I even, if I haven't had enough, protein for the day and I start getting low blood sugar, I might lash out of whoever's right in front of me when I'm feeling upset about something. So, I just think that there's a difference between intentional and unintentional, but the impact on the bullied person is usually still the same.
So how can you tell when you're being bullied? Sometimes it's really obvious, but what can you do when you just have a vague sense that people don't like you and you don't fit in, or you are not sure why?
That's a hard question. I mean,
well, this is a good podcast. I'm trying to run.
I know you ask the tough questions.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I think that in your heart of hearts, right? Like, it's like that little voice that whispers at you, like, this isn't right.
Gut feeling.
Yeah, that gut feeling of like, something's off here, right? Yeah. Listen to your gut. And, I mean, boundaries, man, like, just step away, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of avoidance, just try to get away from these people or say something, and actually say, this isn't working for me. I don't appreciate the way I'm being treated, et cetera. It depends on what the situation is, right?
Yeah. I guess you're answering my next question, which is, what would you tell the parents of a girl who is being bullied? Should your daughter stick it out and learn to develop inner resilience, or should you move her to a safer environment where she's better able to learn? How does one know what to do?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely, how that people say, like, well, you have to figure out what kind of education your child needs by who your child is becoming and what they need. I mean, I think it's the same as, being in the situation of being bullied and how to talk to them, it's like, well, what kind of child are they, right? Like, what do they need? And sometimes a child will thrive more by being taken out of the environment and put into a new one. And sometimes, they'll thrive by sticking up for themselves. Sometimes they'll thrive by, journaling, or it's all of them, or, it just really depends on who they are. But I think the main thing is that they're heard, and that they really get that they've been heard, and that, they have an opportunity to express themselves about how they feel about what's going on. And then you figure out what the best action is moving forward.
So you were bullied starting in the 5th grade. What were the long-term effects that it had on you from that time to adulthood? Did it lead to any bad habits, or trying to fit in groups, or anything like that?
All of the above. There are actually, clinical trials that have been done that have assessed what the impacts are on adults from being bullied as children. And, they include things like, not feeling able to create fulfilling, trusting relationships. That definitely happened to me with friendships and with boyfriends and things like that. It took me a long time to learn, like, what is a good friendship, and who am I as a good friend, and not just saying yes to everybody because I think I like what they're doing or what, is possible. It's really about getting real about like the kinds of relationships that you're having. But I was very messed up about that for a long time. Also, drug dependence, drug use. I definitely, went down the trails of alcohol, using it too much for social situations, using it to fit in, depending on it for, socializing, et cetera.
Sure.
I mean, feeling really anxious about being in new groups of people. I've never felt like I can be in like a group of girls. Like, I still feel that way. And I'm 51 years old. Like, I'm like, I don't know how to act here, and I definitely get very, anxious and really have to talk myself through like, okay, I can do this. I'm liked here, how am I reacting? What am I seeing? And they talk about lower levels of academic achievement and achievement in professions. I think that, in terms of my profession, I feel like I've done quite well and feel quite accomplished. But my education, you mentioned, oh, she's had several certificates and different things. It's like, yeah, I've always felt like, oh, I should go get my master's, and I could have done, the X, Y, and Z, but I've always felt a little, interested in all kinds of things and a bit of a polymath, but also, feeling academically able to achieve certain things. I've been impacted by that. My ability to focus, I think a lot of that was due to like the social impacts of having been bullied in school, and like always like watching my back or focusing too much on the social at school, even though I'm very curious and I think intellectual and well-read, et cetera. But the school environment, I have a little PTSD.
So I know it started in the 5th grade, and I read the book. Did it continue on past the 5th grade, or was that just the worst time of the whole thing?
I think it started in the 5th grade, and then with girl bullying, it's a little different than the pushing and the shoving and the yelling at each other. And some of the dramatized, I think, girl bullying that we see on TV, it's a lot more subtle, and it's about being left out.
Yeah.
It's about, people talking about you behind your back and stealing boyfriends and manipulating you, et cetera. And, I definitely experienced that kind of stuff in high school, all through even college a little bit. And I think part of it is about that kind of like alpha person in the group, and I've never been the alpha. And so maybe I've, just put myself in the position of being the non-alpha.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
So been a little bit more susceptible to it. And of course I've grown, but in the school environment specifically, where you're in a group with lots of, new people, old people, competition for grades, et cetera, things like that, competition for men, for other friendships, for, other relationships. In my experience, it's definitely been fraught.
You stated that you were pretty much around the same classmates for your school years till graduation. Did you ever confront the people who bullied you after graduation? And do you remain friends with any of those classmates today?
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned that I confronted one of them when I was in college. She and I mean, we were in school together from like third grade until the middle of college. And I haven't remained friends with her, though, she still lives in my hometown, and my mom has been friendly with her mom. So I know what's been going on in her life. And I have no ill feelings toward her whatsoever. There have been other girls and women for sure who've bullied me that again, when you're in school, you're like, oh, I started in fifth grade with all these people. And then we went through high school, and some people went to the same college as me. And they were always in my life, and it was always this thing. And I think I definitely went through this big period, especially when I graduated from college. I mean, I moved away from Indiana.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm moving to
California. You're moving on. You're getting out of there.
I went to San Francisco. I started to have, to choose my friends more than the ones that I inherited from my youth.
Sure.
And that makes a difference.
Yeah. Do females, in your opinion, experience more sexual bullying than their male counterparts?
Well, I mean, what do you mean? Like from men or from other girls or?
Yeah, from both. From both.
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think just in my own personal experience, I felt that, my bullying, having been bullied, definitely put me in a weaker position, because also in real life, I didn't necessarily stand up to it. And it's not like I just kind of like let it rain down on me, but it was just kind of this persistent pain. I think it made me more susceptible to being sexually bullied by guys, for sure, which totally happened to me. I don't know to what extent that is just kind of normal. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of other women to experience, whether they'd been bullied or not, I think it's quite prevalent.
Okay.
But I have never been, sexually bullied by another woman. And, not to say that that's not common as well. I mean, to answer your question, I don't really know. I can only speak from my own experience.
Okay.
And, definitely feel that I've been bullied by men sexually.
In your experience dealing with mentoring and your involvement with your anti-bullying agenda, what are some of the most prevalent bullying tactics displayed against females?
Well, exclusion, I think, is the biggest one, where you're like feeling 100% like you weren't included and everyone knows it. That's huge, and just the looks and the snide comments, and the stealing of things, right? So whether it's ideas or a look or meaning like fashion or boys, girls, friends, resources, etc. I use the word stealing kind of harshly, but it's the taking of those things that, in our where we don't quite have our full frontal lobe developed times of our lives.
Yeah.
We can take those things quite seriously and, feel a lot of ownership over who we are and who we're becoming. And also feel really raw in that space of becoming whoever we're becoming. Right. And I think you feel trespassed on, perhaps, or against.
Okay.
So
are you seeing boys bullying girls today? And is it on the rise?
I don't know the answer to that question because I'm not, like on the schoolyard,
Yeah, I was just wondering, in some of your groups or whatever, if you're getting any feedback like that.
I don't hear about it as much, but again, not to say that it's not happening. It's not an area of my expertise, though.
Gotcha. You facilitate a healing workshop where girls can share stories of toxic female friendships and bullying. Can you talk about that and how is it helping?
Well, it's called the Better Friends Club,
Okay.
and it's just starting. So I've only had a few instances, but I think it is incredibly healing. I think that, again, it's just a platform where you can share your story and get like no feedback, no one making comments about it or saying, oh yeah, that happened to me, or I understand. It's more just about being heard and helping to tell your own story so that as you tell it, you can evolve the story into one that's a little bit more powerful for you.
Do you think we're doing enough as a society to combat the bullying epidemic?
I mean, no. I think yes, we're making strides. Yes, things are incredibly different than when I grew up. But like I said at the beginning of our conversation, it's still in our DNA as humans to be competitive in this nature. And I'd love to see us transcend that to create something new, and I've been asking myself, like, what's post-bullying? Like, what does that look like? Like, what kind of world can we have when we're not engaging in this way? And I think so much of it is, we would live in a world that wasn't traumatized,
Yeah.
whether in our home or by our society, or the media. We would be better friends to ourselves and to others. And, we'd probably have more of a we versus like, a them kind of mentality, an us way of looking at the world. And I'm really envisioning that for us. So we're not there yet.
Your book is an excellent resource for parents to obtain and start a conversation with their children about bullying. What is your takeaway message for parents of the bullied and the bullies and the kids being bullied and those committing the bullying? And what's the takeaway message?
The takeaway message. I think the biggest one is quiet a little bit, quiet yourself and try to listen to your own inner voice. Try to listen to that, find tools so that you can listen to that still part of yourself that knows, what the truth is, knows what the good way forward is, and, work on, banishing any fear that you might have and like really allow that voice to come through and then act on what it tells you to do, from your heart, right? From your gut.
Right.
And I think we'll just be better people when we allow ourselves that quiet and instruction from our deepest selves.
Jenny, what excites you going forward in your anti-bullying work? Anything that excites you?
Yeah, I think I'm engaging in a new writing project, and
oh, great.
It's started to spawn sort of, a lot of people have been saying, well, what's next? What's the story of the girl after all of this, right?
Right.
And so I've been exploring that and a variety of topics as it relates to who we are as adults recovering from childhood bullying. And what are some resiliency tools that we can, think about or engage in to help us heal as adults from that, the little pieces that, we're still uncovering. Right.
Right.
And so I'm playing with that a little bit and looking at how that evolves on the page.
Sounds good. So it sounds like there might be another book on the way.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm very beginning.
Or maybe even a podcast. Who knows?
Maybe. Who knows? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just allowing the creative process to guide me, really, and just enjoying writing and thinking.
Yeah, but it sounds like something good's on the horizon. Jenny, how can people contact you?
Well, the best way to contact me is through my website, which is butterfliesbullies.com.
Okay.
And you can learn all about the Better Friends Club and get in touch with me and buy the book, which is available in print, ebook, and in audio, which has me as the reader. So
yes,
be kind.
And the book is featured periodically on my Facebook page, and we started a Facebook group where we have hundreds of people already.
Right
and
on.
so we'll be discussing your book on the Facebook group. So,
well, great. Let me know when you want to do that. I will join in.
oh, sounds good.
Maybe.
Well, you're busy. You're hard to get hold of. I will list all that information in the podcast notes. Thank you, Jenny, so much for being on the podcast and writing this book, which will hopefully ignite a conversation on the subject and help those involved. I wish you all the best going forward in all your endeavors. Comments and suggestions to improve the podcast are welcome. You can email us at itsarapwithrap@gmail.com. Our website is itsarapwithrap.com. Sign up to get on our mailing list. We have a Facebook page, a Facebook group called It's a Rap with Rap. We're on Instagram. It's a Rap with Rap podcast, and all the episodes are on YouTube. It's a Rap with Rap, the podcast uncut. Thanks for listening. Stay safe for now. And everybody, for now, it's a wrap.